got Monica with us, and Monica is a author. She's written a book on sugar.
Author of Dreams, author of Sugar Dreams, Monica is, and she's also a clinical nutritionist, Curt, and an educator.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Monica when I was in Brisbane on the 1st of last month.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today, Monica. So we've got a few questions, and we just thought it'd be really interesting to get you on the program because it's just such an interesting topic, sugar addiction, and I find it really fascinating. So I'm really pleased you could make it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you became interested in the topic of addiction, particularly in relation to sugar?
Yes, like you said, I work with nutrition. It started actually a long time ago. My interest in nutrition started way back when I was in my early 20s. Because when I had my first son, and I lived in Sweden then, where it's cold and dark, and I suffered from postnatal depression then. They didn't know what that was. But
right.
Anyway, my grandmother was a midwife, and she had lots of books. So I found a book that she had in her bookcase. And it was written by an American nutritionist to the film stars in the early, 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I started reading it. And it was all about what we are talking about now. Eat lots of greens, eat good protein, eat good fat, take supplements. And I started doing that. And it worked. So after 3 months, I was out of my depression and I felt really good. So, I really got hooked on nutrition then. That's what really hooked me. Okay. So I started, in those days, we didn't have internet and things. So you had to do your research, you had to read books, you had to go elsewhere to find information. So, but I did as much as I could. And when I was 25, we emigrated to Australia, which gave me a lot more access to information because in Swedish, there wasn't that much information. But of course, in English, there was a lot. Mm-hmm. So I started, I had already studied nutrition before I came here, but I did some more studies. And then in 2005, my eldest son died of a brain tumor.
Oh,
so I then,
sorry.
Yeah. So that's how addiction I knew about because I had worked with addicts. But when we talked about addicts back then, it was alcohol and drugs. Right. And sugar was never mentioned. But what happened was he wanted to be buried in Sweden with his grandfather. So we took his ashes back to Stockholm. And when I was there, I walked around in the bookshops because I love books. So another book really got me on to the subject of sugar addiction. Because I walked around and I saw this book and it had lots of lollies on the outside. And, funny enough, we're all drawn to that. So I picked up the book thinking, it was about lollies. But no, it was about sugar and sugar addiction. Mm. And so that was the first time, which would have been late 2005. And the lady who wrote that book, it was only a small book. She referred to a bigger book that was called The Sugar Bomb. And that was written by an expert on sugar addiction and all other addictions as well. So I took that book and I just started reading. And then I thought, there's nothing like this in Australia. So I read the book coming back here. And then I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write about sugar and sugar addiction because there was no information. And for me, it was sort of a new concept that you could be addicted to sugar. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Hey, Can I ask you one question, Monica? I look at people and I see them and I think, well, maybe you're addicted. How does somebody know if they're addicted?
Well, it's like with all addictions, there are certain things that you have to fulfill to be called an addict. And we now actually I have just done certification, so I can screen assess and diagnose sugar addiction and even the other addictions, but mostly sugar addiction. And we never had that before. It is based on the ICD, so it is a world document that it's built on. So we can now, through questions and really diagnose. Otherwise, addiction is something that you have, or you have, or you don't know you have. But there has to be, you have to be able to not stop. If you wanted to quit, for example, and you can't do it, and then you obsess about whatever it is. If we're talking about food addiction, of course, it's food and sugar, and it is using it even though you know that it's going to hurt you. So
right.
If you are an addict, it's the same as with the drugs and the alcohol. You can't just stop, because you can say to yourself, yes, I'm not going to do it anymore. But, the brain doesn't, it just goes back to want it all the time, because it's got to do with your brain chemistry and that you are craving it. So there's a difference between being a harmful eater and a pathological addict. So if you're a harmful eater, I can say to you that, this is not really good for you. You're nearly diabetic, and, it's not really good. You're overweight, and you think, yeah, okay, I'll just stop then. And you can do it, you see. It's the same as with a lot of drinking and other drugs as well. Some people may not necessarily be addicts. They may still be doing it, and it may be detrimental to their health. But if they get the message that I better stop, they can. If you're an addict, you have problems. You need to do a program, you need to do detox. There's lots of things that you need to do. So there is a difference.
Would you be considered an addict if you manage to stop, but then you revert back and start it up again, a time later? Is that considered addict still?
Yes, it depends. It really depends on how much you are compelled to if you compelled all the time, of course you can stop for a few weeks and just force yourself to stop. But then, eventually the cravings are getting so big that you go back to it, and then you have excuses. Whereas, of course, if you are just a harmful eater or a harmful sugar addict, or sugar addiction is sort of not really an addiction. It's just that you really want it. And it can be emotional. It can be a lot of different things that makes you want to go back, because it is, the dopamine, it's the feeling good that we all want. We all want to feel good. And people with addiction problems have a brain chemistry that does not function properly. So, like you and me, we may eat something and have a little bit of dessert, and we feel great, and we think this is fine. I'm perfectly fine. Whereas somebody who is addicted, they want more and more, and they can't stop. You start with a little bit, and then you can't stop. You go on and on and on, even though you know that it's not good for you. And it's the same as with alcohol and other drugs, of course. It's you can't just have a little bit.
Right.
If you're an addict, you have to abstain totally. It's nothing else.
What do you think of this, Monica? Back when I had my clinic, I remember going through some training. I don't remember what group it was with, but they said that one of the problems why we have so much problems with drug addiction here in the States, and maybe down in Australia too, but here in the States, one of the reasons that we have so much problems with adults having addictions is because we started them out as babies, as infants. We put them on infant formulas that were high in sugar. And then when they were toddlers, then we gave them sodas and we gave them sugary breakfast cereals and all that. And so we kind of fed into that addiction. And so would you say that maybe because that's accepted, that then when they got to be older, now all of a sudden, that might be what caused the trouble? That's what triggered them to now be maybe drug addicts or alcoholics?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You see, the problem is, and that's why I wrote my book too, is that we start feeding our children sugar from a very early age. And we're not really meant to have that much sugar, but that's what we do. And you think, oh, they can have a little bit of sweets. But what you're doing is that you're building a path to the center, the pleasure center in the brain, that later on will then make it much, much easier, not all the time, but make it a lot easier for nicotine, alcohol, and other drugs to make their way there. And that's what happened with my son. But I had no idea about the sugar addiction, but he preferred right from the start. Sweet things, breads, ketchup, tomato sauce, hot dogs, things like that he would eat. It was very difficult to get him to eat really, really good food. So all the way from the beginning, he was craving that, which meant that his brain was, even before, just when he was born, his brain was geared for addiction. I mean, his father's an alcoholic or recovered alcoholic, but still he had the genetics for that. And I could see when I thought about it later, yes, of course, he just always wanted sugary stuff. And then when he was a healthy guy until he was 17. Suddenly, of course, then they start smoking, they start going out drinking, and he was hooked straight away. It's not like, it was a slow thing. It was instant. And from then on, that really, really, it killed him in the end. I mean, yes, they will say that he had a brain tumor and that's the cause of death. But, if you ask me, he died of addiction.
Wow. And so, Monica, if people are trying to lose weight, what's the hardest thing? I guess, what's one way that they can break an addiction if they've got issues with like sugar and stuff like that and they're trying to lose weight? What would you recommend?
Well, you see, if we eat real food, so if we eat food as it not comes out of a box, so if you use veggies, fish, meat, chicken, eggs, and things like that, you have, and a bit of fruit and good fats. We need a lot of good fats, and this is the problem with what we have now with the obesity, that we have been told for so long that fat's so bad. Right. And yes, fat, the bad fat is bad, but the good fat is really good because our brain really needs that. Because if you go back and think about how it was way back, people ate in summer or spring and summer, we ate lots to get fat. And then, so we actually got resistant. We got insulin resistance, but that was a part of life so that we could put fat on. Because if you didn't have that fat, especially if you lived in a cold country, even in a warmer country, you wouldn't survive the winter because you had to have that and everything had to slow down. So all the fat that you put on during the spring and summer, when it came to spring again, it was all used up. So that's how it should be. But you see, we have summer all the time, 24/7. There's no, we have food everywhere and there's far too much of food. And eating has sort of become entertainment, which it's not really to be. It has become. Yeah, it's entertainment now, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's interesting. And so the other question I was going to ask you is, so people who are watching us live or the recording, they might think, oh yes, you should avoid sugar so you don't gain weight. But what are the other reasons you could share with our viewers why sugar is not good for the body at all? Or excess?
Excess sugar. We need very little sugar. We can survive. There are no essential carbohydrates, really. There are essential fatty acids, there are essential amino acids, and there are essential vitamins and minerals, but there are no essential carbohydrates. Yes, we need to eat vegetables, preferably, and some fruit. But yeah, that's it. But you have diabetes, heart disease, obesity, ADD, addiction, and a lot of many more killer diseases that come from the way we are living today and all the carbohydrates that we are consuming, because we're actually not built to consume that much carbohydrates, and especially not all the refined ones, of course, you know, all the white bread and flour and pizzas and, and rice and things like that, because it does put on weight, which is supposed to do. The body thinks, yes, I have to have this because famine's going to come. But the sad thing is that, of course, we don't have any famine anymore.
You know, what I find interesting, Monica, is that if you go back and you look here in the United States, again, I'm speaking strictly for our country, back around the early 1900s, the average person in America consumed about 10 to 12 pounds of sugar per year. That was the consumption of sugars and sweeteners. Last year, they said it was over 160 pounds of sugar per person that we consumed in the United States. So we've added 150 pounds of sugar per person. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, and it is very similar here in Australia too. Maybe not as much, but very close. And that is because of what all the carbohydrates and all the added sugar and all the soft drinks and you know, desserts and things that we didn't have way back then. Like when you're talking, even when I grew up, you didn't have dessert every day. It's, you know, you ate food, and not desserts all the time. That was only for special occasions. But then you can look back too, that even when I went to school and later, there was no obese people around.
That's right. You know, you see these kids walking to school now, and as they're walking to school, they got a can of Mountain Dew or Coca-Cola in their hand as they're walking to school, and you just go, holy cow. I mean, there's going to be problems because of that.
Definitely. That's why we have such high, you know, diabetes is so rampant. I mean, we have a lot of kids, 10, 11, 12, with type 2 diabetes. And it's really used to be an old people's disease.
Wow. Monica, can I ask you, what's your professional opinion on, you know, people who are suffering from cancer and sugar consumption? What do you know, if you come across that, what do you recommend? What's your personal opinion about that and their consumption of sugar?
Well, my opinion is, and you know, it's not just my opinion. We know that cancer tumors actually need sugar to grow. If you cut out all the sugar in your diet, you are cutting out the nourishment for the cancer. So in many cases, you can actually do that and you can heal.
Wow. Yeah, I was just really interested about that. Another question I had for you was, what do you recommend to mothers having been through that situation yourself and telling your story? You know, if you could go back and do it again, what would you change in terms of, you know, raising your child and feeding it? And what would you recommend to other mothers?
I would definitely recommend to stay away from any added sugar. To give kids, you know, I mean, usually breastfeeding is really good because then you get all the nutrients that you really need. But when you start giving children solid foods, just to give them what you're having, mash it up and give it to them so that they get used to having vegetables and having, you know, all the other proteins as well, not with any added sugar, because it is something that you get used to. And of course, also the soured foods, you know, like the sauerkrauts and the soured milks like kefir and natural yogurt, which is really good for your gut flora as well. So I think if children get to eat that from the beginning, then it's okay. It's much easier to feed them good food because they don't have that those sugar cravings because they haven't been fed sugar from the beginning.
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, for those of you that are just listening to us, we've got Monica on the call here with us, and she's written a book on sugar addictions, and so we're interviewing Monica. So I just want to point out for people who have just joined us.
Fantastic. Yeah, my brother has raised his children to, you know, drink water. They haven't even been introduced to any soft drink from a young age. And one of them won't even have any or won't even eat chocolate now because he's acquired the taste for water, and that sugar taste is, you know, not there. But it makes me think back to a story from another family member. This is going back some time. She actually raised her son, and at this time, she thought it was actually good to give a child Ribena, and the Ribena packet said on it, you know, it has vitamin C. So she thought it was good because he's getting vitamin C, and everyone was talking about vitamin C. So she was giving him sippy cups of Ribena all the time, and he ended up actually losing his teeth. So, and I've seen that still happening. I think people have kind of a bit more wise about it now because it wasn't that well known about, you know, sugar as it is today. But there is still definitely places in the world. I have seen a couple of shows on TV in relation to certain states in America and different communities where that sort of stuff is still going on, and people losing their teeth, which is really, yeah, quite sad. But anyway, I just thought it was just interesting because I thought I'd share that story.
Yeah, I'll tell you something else then, which is also, you see, it says that it's got vitamin C in it, but it also has sugar in it. And believe it or not, our bodies will actually prefer the sugar. The sugar molecule and the vitamin C molecule are very, very similar. Oh. However, because of our ancestry and way back, our body actually prefers the sugar because it was so scarce. So it lets the sugar in, and if you have a lot of sugar in, it won't let the vitamin C in, you see. So it's not a good thing with these juices and drinks that have added vitamin C when they have sweets. When it's sweet, it doesn't really do anything. And this is, you know, if you want vitamin C, then you take vitamin C as a supplement, which I think that we should all do. Mm-hmm. And another thing, like we talked about my depression in the beginning, the B vitamins was what really, really helped me because that, and you see the H pill has a lot of that in it. So if you could give everybody that, we would have, and take the sugar away and the bread away from them, we would have a lot less mental illness.
Wow.
That's so true, isn't it? If you can get people taking the H pill, the AGE pill, we can actually get them off, probably help them with their sugar.
Yeah.
So Monica, in your book, you talk about healing nutrients. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yes, absolutely. So what we are using for addiction are specific amino acids. We use the B vitamins, of course, because B vitamins are so vital. And it's a whole complex. So you need all of them. And then you can have extra vitamins, particularly niacin, because it has been used a lot for healing addiction, for healing mental illness as well. And that was Dr. Abraham Hoffer, who was the doctor to Bill W., who started the AA movement. Because all of those guys, they gave up their drink, but they were still not feeling all right mentally. Right. They had anxiety and depression. And what he did then was giving them niacin. And they got well. And they got rid of their depression. So, you know, the vitamins, of course, but the minerals are just as important. You know, we need all the minerals. We need all the vitamins. And then we need good amino acids. So we need good protein, which preferably should be grass-fed, you know, and fish that's wild caught, chicken that's free range, and eggs that are free range. So all of those nutrients are healing because that's what our body is craving.
Wow. It's really interesting that comment you made before, because there's essential amino acids and essential fatty acids, but there's nothing essential in carbohydrates. So actually the healing nutrients come from the proteins and the fats.
That's right.
Fantastic. And so if someone's trying to get off sugar, what sort of substitute can they use in replace, or what do you recommend? What sort of things can they do, you know, put in their shopping cart when they're in the supermarket?
Well, you know, if you're an addict, there is no substitution.
Right.
You don't substitute anything. But
Okay.
if you have a problem and a weight problem and you're not an addict, then what you can do, of course, the best substitute is fresh fruit, because there's nothing else. You know, I don't recommend any of the artificial sugar, you know, that you can, none of them. I think that you really have to get used to having stuff without the sugar.
Yeah.
And even people have coffee with lots of sugar. You know what? They don't have coffee for coffee. They have coffee because they want the sugar hit.
Right.
And you find that because if you take the sugar, I don't want the coffee anymore.
Right.
So I think substitute in the way that you can eat. You can have fruit and certain vegetables has sugar in them too. But if you have some fruit, if you need something sweet, especially if you have dinner and you want something sweet, then you can have some kind of fruit instead.
Fantastic. Great. Curt, did you have any other questions for Monica today?
Well, really not any question as much as, Monica, if somebody wanted to get your book, how do they get it? I mean,
on my web.
Plug your book. Get people to order.
Yeah. Here it is. Here it is. On my website, sugardreams.com.au, and there's no freight. It's freight free. So if you order it online, then we will send it to you.
Sugardreams.com.au. .com.au. So sugardreams.com.au.
Yep.
All right.
Fantastic.
You know, and I know based on what you and I talked about a month ago and what you've said tonight, I mean, a great book to read. I haven't had a chance to finish reading it yet. So.
No, and it's a book that's easy to read because there are more books out now, quite a lot of books with a lot of facts. My book is, I wrote it so that particularly women with children and younger people can read it. So it has stories and it has little bits of information. So it's much easier to read than if you get a book that, I mean, I don't mind reading a book that has a lot of information in it because that's what I do. But for somebody who has children or is a young mom or a young family, it's much easier to read like my book because it hasn't got a lot of heavy stuff in it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
You know, and in closing, you know, Monica, I'm just going to say that, check this out. Back in the early 1990s, when I first got into clinical practice, the local newspaper, they had the headlines that said, why are children getting obese? And they went through the article here in the Fargo Forum, and they basically had an article and they said, scientists are confused. Why are kids so fat these days? This was, 30 years ago. So I wrote a letter to the editor and I said, well, they're fat because they eat too much sugar. And so then I had a letter written back to me through the newspaper, through the letter to the editor, and it was from the local president of Mindak Sugar Cooperative. So they're actually the ones that grew the sugar, and they said, Curt should shut up. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's because they want to sell the sugar, of course.
Yeah, it's a big industry.
It's a very, very big industry.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, it's if people get a hold of me, if you get a hold of me, I'll get you in touch with Monica. You can get her book, and I know Andrea will do the same thing. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us tonight.
That's okay. You're welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and there was some great information there and a lot of value for viewers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks, Monica. Thank you. Thanks, Katie. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.